Can a character's big hurt or wound or shard of glass occur during the story? And this is a fun one because sometimes, like you just illustrated with Katniss, the big hurt or whatever comes before the story begins, and the character is bringing that baggage with them. But another, and that's obviously an excellent way to, to introduce a character and have some mystery to them, and to sort of uh, let them bring things into the story that you can gradually uncover as the story progresses. That's fun. Lots of potential there. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But another way is to have a character who seems to be living an idyllic life, or just a standard life, that they're not really bringing a lot of emotional baggage with them or whatnot. But then you can introduce the big hurt, the wound, whatever, to them while you're telling the story, and then that can be the catalyst for character development. That can come as a major turn in the story, or the dark night of the soul. That's a great illustration of that. If when you can do something horrible to your character, uh, and have that as a turning point. Is this character going to grow from this? Or are they going to learn from this? Or are they going to take something from this that then allows them to become the hero, if that's the sort of story you're telling. But you absolutely can do that within the story. I would even argue that sometimes that's the most powerful types of stories, when you walk through that hurt with the reader.
Yeah. Yeah, and when I did the character development workshop, I said I think I might have been too absolute. I personally think for protagonists specifically,
Mhm.
the big hurt should come before the story for most of them. But like you said, there is power in showing that really traumatic event during the story, and not every character, like yeah, not every character has something traumatic that's in their past. There is
Mhm.
the character archetype of the everyman or the common person or whatever you want to call it, and they
Right.
are, you and I. They're just a person in a place living their life. They're Bilbo. They're Bilbo and Frodo are the ones that come to mind. They happen to be
Mhm.
basically the same, but they come to mind. And um and they don't really have a traumatic past, right? Because they're just happy where they are. Their inciting incident kicks them out of there, and then it's through, admittedly, some trauma that they develop. And that's
Right.
why you have the hero's journey in particular is very cyclical, right? It's
Right.
changing, and then you're coming back to who you are. So then in subsequent books too, you can point to something in the first book that informs the character's big hurt. Um, I think if you're not going to include, well, the other thing too, the big hurt, um, which I love that phrasing, but I just made it because it
Mhm.
sounds very Doug. So like, so the ghost or the ghost or the wound, um, that can be such a compelling piece of character development in that it's not something you even have to tell all the time. You can
Right.
even hint at it, but it just tells you how your character reacts and why they act the way they do, which makes it more genuine when you're guiding them through situations, if you understand that element. If you don't have that and you're going to introduce it during the story, you need to do a little bit of extra legwork in the beginning to really understand this character and what makes them move.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We one of our fellow dabblers, Abby, is a big fan of the ghost and the lie. And yeah, I think KM Wyland called it the lie the character believes. Because I
Mm.
think she coined the term ghost as well. So when I told Abby I was featuring that, she was very excited. Um, but what I do want to mention too, for anyone here or anyone watching this after, is that when you do have something like this, when you have a big hurt and you have a lie, the whole point of the character's arc revolves around that lie now. Right? It takes place in the story, but you
Right.
also need, as your character progresses, there needs to be something that they need to realize. And then there needs to be a moment where they either accept the new truth or cling on to the old lie. Right? These are kind of four parts that work together. But the initial two or the initial one is the big hurt, and then the lie that stems from it. So again, I think if you're writing a story with the big hurt in it, and I feel like I'm rambling now, but I think this is important. If you're writing a story when the big hurt actually happens, you need to adjust what your character's arc looks like, especially if that
Right.
traumatic event happens later. Your arc is kind of more like that, and then leaps up and
Right.
comes down. It might feel rushed. So maybe you focus on something else. Maybe like there's a couple different questions you have to ask yourself at that point. It's not easy.
Yeah. It's not.